It's times like this when the power and the value of the STEM learning ecosystem's community of practice becomes very visible. Presented by STEM at Home, an initiative launched by the STEM learning ecosystem's community of practice, STEM Community Conversations is a series of conversations for teachers, school officials, community leaders, and the many others impacted by school closures and virtual learning. For those of you new to this initiative, the STEM ecosystems, operated by TIES, which you can find at stemecosystems.org, harness the power of business and industry, funders and foundations, K-12 schools, higher education, and more to find solutions to common problems and to build thriving communities. Embracing the ecosystem way, these gatherings will provide a space and time for leaders to share common challenges, ideas, and resources. Conversations will revolve around successful models and new ideas to support STEM learning experiences during and beyond this time of social distancing. These are interactive conversations where you will have the opportunity to ask your questions to our experts. So make sure to enter your questions by clicking that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, where you can also upvote the questions asked by others. I'll be bringing that up over and over again. My name is Jeremy Shore, and thank you for joining us today for a conversation as we explore the needs of our students, families, and greater community. If you wouldn't mind, please let us know your name, location, and organization in the chat. We're excited for you to join several ecosystem leaders today to learn more about how they're engaging families, helping support small business with student jobs, and making significant changes to equity and access within their regions. I know I have a lot of questions for our speakers. I was so excited about this panel today that I cut a not small portion of the tip of my finger off rushing to get up here. So hopefully this holds on and we can survive without me running away. But I know I have a lot of questions for our speakers, and we'll get to those in a couple minutes. I know that you will as well. So make sure you use that Q&A button to ask your questions and to vote on the other questions that you see. Even if you don't have a specific question, it's really important that you look through the questions that others have asked and vote them up so that we can see which questions are resonating with you. We'll be asking some of those questions live on air or asking you to ask them live on air. I'm so happy to be joined today by four incredible leaders. Starting off, we have LaTrenda Sherrill, Pittsburgh Regional STEM Ecosystem and Remake Learning. Many of you on today's webinar know LaTrenda, and you know her as a community innovator and leader and someone deeply committed to connecting access for all. She has nearly 8 years of experience in youth development, government, and education. In her most recent role, she served as the Deputy Chief of Education in the Office of Mayor William Peduto for the city of Pittsburgh. I know as a Clevelander, I'm supposed to hate Pittsburgh, but LaTrenda, my mom is from east of Pittsburgh, my wife is from south of Pittsburgh, and I'm a really big fan of the work you're doing. So I'm curious, how is Remake Learning changing its structure and its supports right now to support the needs of your community during this time?
Yeah, so I think there's always an opportunity to go back to basics, right? Like when you're in a crisis, there's an opportunity to just like, what do you do well? So you stay in your lane and you do that. And so Remake has done a few things. We always focus our work on our 5 C's, which are convening, championing, communicating, catalyzing, and collaborating. Hopefully that's 5, I don't know. But the first thing we did was we convened those that we had relationships with. So we got our work groups together and we said, look, let's talk about like what you're doing. So 2 weeks after some of the distance learning was happening and schools had to go back to doing what, getting back to learning again, we said, what's happening in your region? If you're, not in your region, but in your school, what's happening with your out of school time program, let's talk about it. And so we wanted people to get together to hear from each other and ask questions of each other. And so we did that. We had about 80 or so folks that we convened to have some conversations. Then we organized who was doing what. So we tried to use our coordinating function that we always, do as a part of our natural work. We were hearing people were giving out STEM kits, people were distributing this, they were distributing that. And so there were lots of people organizing the meals and the social services and the things that are essential to learners, but we wanted to be in our lane. So if we knew folks were distributing maker kits or STEM kits and all of those things, we were like, look, how can we help you? We don't directly serve kids, but we can help facilitate some of this conversation. And then how can we get you all together to ask a funder for some support? And so that's one of the things that we're doing right now is we are writing grants to support efforts, collective efforts of individuals. And so that coordinating function has totally been highlighted. We communicated and we championed a lot of things. So again, we got people together to talk about what they were doing and what they were changing. So let's write about what they're doing and what they're changing. And so we literally, in a problem solution format, wrote a few blog posts that we call promising practices in an effort to elevate local efforts to just adapt to this new remote learning environment. And so if they were working with folks with exceptionalities or learners in rural areas, like how can we share, like this is what they use, this is their technology, this is how often they've changed their schedule, or this is what their new schedule look like. Let's do what we do well, and let's talk about what folks are doing. The last couple things that we've done, one, everyone has a bunch of resources that they're sharing with their stakeholders. Way too many, it's overwhelming. Like I'm overwhelmed, it makes me anxious. And so one of the things we tried to do was like probably around like the second or third week of the stay-at-home order, we took an assessment of everything that we were getting. And luckily, and this happened by luck, but one of the members of our team is dating a guy from IBM. So we created this interesting virtual assistant online where we curated some of the resources that we were getting. So IBM and their legal department vetted a bunch of resources for us. And then we, were able to create this virtual assistant on our site where people can type in like one word and it would shoot out a bunch of resources in an effort to just streamline what's getting to people so people aren't getting so overwhelmed. And then the last thing we're launching now is just an effort that we had already planned to launch in the fall, but because of COVID, we've kind of moved it up. It's our Tomorrow campaign, and it was gonna be all about how are folks remaking learning tomorrow. Like this is 13 years of Remake Learning. Honestly, we started it a long time ago, and so now this class this year is really the class of Remake Learning. They've been around, they've seen Remake Learning since the beginning, and so we were gonna launch it anyways, but we've moved it up. And so we're creating this sort of marketing push around like what does Remake Learning look like now, and what should tomorrow look like. And so quickly, those are the things that we've been able to do.
And I think one of the things that I've told people for years, frankly, and it's really evident in your answer, is Remake Learning is a really great initiative. But even if it doesn't fit what you're doing in your community, the structure of Remake Learning and how you guys developed it is exactly what you're doing here. It's all about listening, finding the needs. It's sort of awful that listening is something that isn't just a natural part of everyone's process, but it isn't. It's listening, finding the needs, bringing people together, and then really kind of specifically segmenting out what the plan of attack is. That's really cool, and we're looking forward to learning from you more throughout this hour. Next up, we have Mary Adams from the Greater Cincinnati STEM Collaborative, and the program manager, transforming strategist, IT STEM professional. Like LaTrenda, Mary is someone well known to most ecosystem leaders. Mary is an expert IT professional and change expert who spent most of her 30-plus year career with Procter & Gamble. We just learned earlier, before you all started, she was so committed to Procter & Gamble that she skipped a Rolling Stones concert just to go to a meeting. Her experience includes IT applications and infrastructure, data analytics, global operations, and program and project management. She founded the Greater Cincinnati STEM Collaborative as a P&G executive on loan in 2011 and currently serves as its co-strategist and program manager. She also leads GCSC development and fundraising. So Mary, as an IT professional, I'm wondering how you see the impact of a lack of equity and access to computers and the internet for students. How are they being impacted? I know we've had this conversation in general for years, and we know that kids are being impacted, but how are they being impacted now under this pandemic differently or more?
You mean from a technology standpoint, right, Jeremy?
Whatever standpoint you think, but yeah, I'm thinking on the technology side and the economic side and there's all sorts of sides to this. So
all of it. Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Jeremy, for hosting this, facilitating. I've watched a couple of these. They're always great. Ties, thanks for getting us together. It's wonderful to learn together during times of crazy need. Yeah. I am an IT professional, and for years and years, I have to tell you, the concert I missed for the Rolling Stones was Steel Wheels. Was like one of the most famous concert, tours of all time. So that's the one I missed, but it was a really good meeting I got to go to. I don't even remember anything about it other than that. So at the beginning of the year, something I wanted to do forever was to attend the Consumer Electronics Show. It happens the first week of January every year out in Las Vegas. This year was 150,000 people from all across the world, probably about a quarter of them from Asia, which was an interesting time in retrospect. One of the things they talked about was this is the time in history when internet access becomes a right. And that made sense. You know, we use the internet for so many things. We use technology for so many things. That makes sense. Yep, that's coming. And then COVID strikes. And the digital divide that has been growing in our country and in other places all of a sudden became the digital Grand Canyon. It's huge. It's impactful. And COVID forced us all to send the kids home, and home wasn't equipped for virtual learning. Home wasn't equipped for feeding. Home wasn't equipped with families who were essential workers and had to go out and work and expose themselves to this nasty COVID-19 beast every day. So, I mean, we knew the issues were there. We knew the role of schools in keeping children healthy, not just fed, but healthy. We know the role the schools play in community, but all of that became so amplified in COVID-19. And so I've so many times remembered being in Las Vegas and hearing this is the time when internet access becomes a right. And that's exactly the conversation now. But there's also that conversation about equity and disproportionate impact of this evil disease, this evil virus that is hitting us. So, and the good thing about that, in times of extreme crisis come breakthrough solutions. And that's what I think this call is about today. It's just lifting some up. There are many more out there than everybody's going to get to tell the story. But that's like the silver lining to this particularly really bad cloud.
Yeah, you know, one of the things we've been talking about a lot in these sessions is that not only is this equity issue huge and critical, but also we're in the silver lining to something as terrible as this is one of those rare times when the entire world is thinking together and looking to make change together. Now's our opportunity, potentially our last opportunity for a while, to really harness this collective philosophy of needing to bring this access to everyone. It's really, really critical, and something that I hope ecosystems can and are playing a big part in. Up next, we have Frank Creech, NC STEM ecosystem, driving the future in Greene County schools, and continue the theme with the familiar. Many of us know Dr. Frank Creech, who has served large urban and small rural low-wealth school districts in North Carolina for over 20 years as a teacher, principal, and district leader. Frank was selected as an NC Principal Fellow and completed his MSA at UNC Chapel Hill in 2000. In 2005, Frank earned his Ed.D. in Education Leadership at UNC Chapel Hill. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction hired Frank as a transformation coach to facilitate professional learning, coach principals of low-performing schools, and assist districts in implementing continuous improvement processes. So Frank, we're not only under this umbrella of pandemic, but also schools now are transitioning into summer in a way that has never happened before in probably the history of education. So schools are kind of in this world and transitioning to summer. What do they need to be focusing on? What do they need to be thinking about to support that transition and to get our kids ready for next year?
Most importantly, Jeremy, I believe continuing to communicate with our students and families. That is our top priority. And I believe most principals across the country would tell you that that is something that they think about every day. You know, what are we doing to continue to communicate? How many different ways can we reach out and share information? And it's not just about continuing to push students academically, but it's about checking in on what their basic needs are, as well as their social emotional health. Mary spoke about the connectivity gaps, and definitely in our more rural districts, we experience that. And remote learning looks in some places like families coming by the school on designated days to pick up instructional packets. And so principals are continuing to find new ways to engage their families, but also our teachers are in a tremendous learning curve. Whether your district or your school was extremely innovative and moving toward being able to facilitate virtual or blended learning without a hiccup, the demands placed on everyone immediately has definitely raised the awareness and made some of the gaps more visible to all of us. So, you know, principals are cheerleaders, they're communicators, and right now, as you mentioned, moving into summer, typically a lot of our schools will host day camps or summer learning opportunities. And I know my district, we're looking at what are some ways that we can flip some of the things that we do to keep our students engaged, who may rely heavily on school systems and ecosystems to provide meaningful opportunities for them during the summer. So it is an unprecedented time, to say the least, but I think we talk a lot about we're all going to be a whole lot better in a couple of weeks at some things that we had never gotten to previously, or things that were on our list to develop a skill towards. So there's definitely some benefit from that. And I think our teachers and parents develop a deeper appreciation of the work that each other do, because you were mentioning your daughter's experience working on the mask, and you know, you're trying to maintain some things in the household while working with her on that. I have a daughter getting ready for an AP exam in one room, and another who is working on her first day of summer school classes. And my wife is running IEP meetings in another room. So we are all being stretched and finding new ways that we live and work together. So moving into the summer, we are doing our very best to plan, not just for what's happening in the next several weeks, but what does next school year look like when that comes around, and how do we continue to transition and be more flexible with the remote learning needs?
I think one of the themes that's come up a lot in these conversations and others is that focusing on right now is really critical, but at least to me, the most important, and I think you agree, the most important thing right now is, are our kids safe? Are they fed? Are they doing some learning and staying engaged and having some social outlets? The really bigger challenge is, how do we continue this thinking so that we're prepared for this type of scenario when, not if, it happens again? And also, what can we be learning about education right now in in this lab that we have that can be applied to all learning, whether it's you know, in-person learning, blended learning, virtual learning, all of those things. And those, I think, are really important conversations. I do want to dig in a little bit later to some of the other things you said about summer and summer camp, summer learning, summer experiences. I think that's a good conversation point for us in a little bit. But before we get there, I'd like to introduce our last panelist, someone very familiar to all of you, Alyssa Briggs, STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice, and the Interim Director of NeoSTEM Ecosystem. Alyssa has served as the Director of the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice for the last several years. And just recently, in addition to her leadership role with the SLECOP, she returned to serve as the Interim Director of the NeoSTEM Ecosystem in Northeast Ohio, an ecosystem that she helped lead from its beginning. Before her work with NeoSTEM and the SLECOP, Dr. Briggs served as a college professor and director of a statewide collaborative project bringing together higher education with businesses. And before that, Alyssa worked as an investigative reporter and editor. We asked Alyssa to join today's webinar to share about a really unique project happening in NeoSTEM right now. Alyssa, can you tell us about it? What's this project?
Yeah, I definitely will tell you about it, but I cannot believe that we're 21 minutes into this webinar and no one has commented about your kitchen yet. Can you please explain, and then I'll talk about the pilot.
Listen, this is the, we have things to talk about. These are hard conversations. So we are sitting here in the Golden Girls kitchen, eating some virtual cheesecake and talking about our problems.
Okay, well, does that make me B. Arthur?
Is that who you want to be?
No, probably not. Betty White. Okay.
All right.
All right. So about a month and a half ago, I was on a call with some principals from Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And one of the principals of one of the schools said that one of the big problems that she was facing right then and there is that students were not attending virtual classes because they had to go out and get jobs to help support their families, you know, who had been laid off because of COVID. Hour later, I'm on another call with some business leaders and some community leaders who were talking about the challenge of so many businesses in Cleveland being brick and mortar only, that they didn't have much of an online presence. And, you know, if they did, it was, you know, very basic, and they had no way of connecting to, you know, any kind of online ordering systems or to make it known that they had delivery available. So, you know, I pulled together some of the NeoSTEM ecosystem leaders, and we had, oh, I don't know, maybe an hour-long planning call, and hatched this idea that what if we pair high school students with these brick and mortar business owners to help them learn how to give their business a more robust online, or in some cases, an online existence. And so we are now 3 weeks into, we found some funding. We are paying the students $10 an hour. They are working only $10 a week, or 10 hours a week. The businesses now have, some of them have websites, some of them have Facebook pages, some of them are, one of them is doing, it's a barber, and he's gonna do a Facebook Live event soon because he's offering free haircuts, you know, for healthcare workers and frontline workers. And it's been just a really cool, very interesting, very simple pilot that all of the, there's in Ohio, there's a structure called Community Development Corporations, probably exists in other places as well. So all of the community development corporations in Ohio now want to replicate this. So we're in the process of trying to find, and it's this low dollar project. We did find some funding to buy some of the business owners computers and a couple of the students Wi-Fi hotspots so that they could participate in the program. But it's just been really kind of cool and fun, and we'll see where it goes. So that's it.
It's a really cool opportunity to not only help the community and those who don't maybe have the skills or the access, but to also give our kids some real world experiences in both helping their community and in, frankly, marketable skills. I'm excited to see how that moves forward, and to listen as you share that work with the rest of the ecosystems. So I'd like to start off this conversation talking a little bit about what LaTrenda was talking about. How are the four of you really reaching your communities? What are you doing to listen to them, to bring them together, and to find out their needs? Mary, what does this look like in Cincinnati?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I loved when LaTrenda started talking about the convening. And that's so powerful to use the technology to bring us together, frankly, to let more voices into a conversation than could have ever gathered in a certain room at a certain time of day, when during that time, most teachers are in the school classroom teaching. So we actually are in a little slow class compared to her, though, because we didn't do our first great big virtual community convening until last Friday. But we were able to bring all of our partners together, and we gave them prompts of questions which were along the lines of, what are the needs, problems, issues you're facing, especially as you think summer and beyond, and don't forget next school year, and what are the resources you need to address them? So this was this multifaceted online dialogue plus chat in the box the whole time, with K-12 partners, higher ed partners, other nonprofit partners, and business partners. So that is a great model. Early on, we took the approach of a lot of one-on-one conversations, kind of the way Alyssa described. You know, it was crazy, it was wild, we're keeping our teams productive, we're trying to be productive, yet I saved time in my calendar each week to connect with at least 3 to 4 partners live, one-on-one, just listen to each other, share notes. And out of those conversations came some really big ideas, kind of like Alyssa just described. I'm not sure who else on this call from our hometown, but there's one I'm going to share 2 examples of what happened in the one-on-ones. So one is similar to Alyssa. We have a local nonprofit that's focused on working with high schoolers to get them interested in IT careers and get them prepared. They were going to have a bunch of internships this summer, but the employers who were going to employ them kind of went like, I don't have money for that. I can't focus on that. And they pulled away. So this nonprofit had all these great high schoolers ready for jobs, but the jobs kind of went away. Meanwhile, our friends at the YMCA, who've been doing pandemic childcare the whole time, have been trying to figure out what to do in the summer with the children that are going to come into their buildings. And they didn't want to do enrichment and activities. They want to do deep learning. Out of those two parallel, almost back-to-back conversations like Alyssa described, came the opportunity for the high schoolers to lead coding camps using technology for the kids that are going to be in the YMCAs this summer. So the high school, we have a K-12 educator, computer science savvy guy, writing curriculum. The high schoolers are learning it. They're going to be online teaching it. And counselors at the Ys are then going to turn to the kids and say, okay, let's get our Chromebooks out and working on our coding exercises. And they're going to do this 2 times a week across
It's an opportunity for experts to kind of share the instruction while having the support of the people who are kind of out there in the front lines and working with the kids.
And it connected 2 partners that had never previously worked together, the IT focused one and the YMCA. It got them together and it served 2 needs. And now it's created something that we can scale and take out to more partners in our community. It's a solution born of need.
Yeah, you know, there's all these fancy definitions that Alyssa wrote that are beautifully written about, like, and Veronica, that are about, you know, what the STEM ecosystems are. But the down and dirty version is, listen, we bring people together who normally aren't together, and we say, you've got a lot more overlap in your problems than you think you do. So let's find those and get together. Frank, what about in North Carolina? How are you bringing folks together, and how are you kind of finding out about the needs that they have? It is possible that Frank is frozen because he doesn't seem to be breathing either. I think we lost Frank. Hopefully he'll be back in a minute. That's okay. LaTrenda, I was going to come to you next anyway, so I'll just skip right to that. So I'm curious. I know that because of the pedigree and the press and the renown that the work in Pittsburgh has gotten, that you get a lot of calls from people around the country about how do we do this stuff. So when they're asking you that question, what's the advice that you give them about convening communities that people say, oh my gosh, that is so, I can't believe we haven't done that? What's the aha moment that people have a lot when they're talking and learning from the work of Pittsburgh?
Interesting. That's a very interesting question, and I don't know if I was prepared for that. I think, at least for me, I mean, I think we always tell people, at least, or instruct people to, you know, start with your network, right? Like, start with who you know, because I am pretty sure if you start with that first ring circle of who you know, they're going to know someone else who's going to know someone else. And so starting with who you know and thinking about those disparate stakeholders to bring to the conversation, I think is super important, especially now. And so one of the things that we were able to do during this pandemic, okay, like, not only getting back to what we do, but getting back to who we know, right? And so we know we have champions that are funders. We know we have champions that are in out of school time. We know we have superintendents that are champions. And so going to that listening, how can we convene superintendents to talk to each other and talk about the issues that they're having? And so we're actually going to have a call coming up soon, specifically around the work that superintendents are doing and how they're reacting. The other thing that we've done as it relates to what we know, like, I think each of our ecosystems probably have some type of stake in the ground when it comes to our community. Like, people respect the work we're doing, they respect what we say. And so Remake has sort of this advisory board, our council, that kind of directs all of the things that we do, or not really direct, but they they approve and they offer guidance and advice. And so basically we're hoping to convene that council during this moment in time to share a bunch of recommendations on how they feel like we should move forward for the future of learning as it relates to now in COVID. So issuing some type of guidance to our community.
So Trent, I always know that I can ask you hard questions, and you always have good answers for them. So it's very, it's key. It's key. So Frank, you are moving again, which is exciting for all of us now that you're back. So I'd like to ask you the same question before we move on a little bit. That's what is happening in North Carolina. How are you bringing people together, and how are you convening people in order to find out what they need and to really support those needs?
We are working with our stakeholders, our community stakeholders, parents and business owners, reaching out and offering up some short polls for them to indicate their needs. As some of other panelists have discussed, we are trying to connect back with our families and find out what would they need if we had to move to more remote learning in the next school year, if it had to become a normal part of our schooling experience. Would they have, what resources do they need from us so that we can budget appropriately? Also, our professional organizations in North Carolina Association for School Administrators is convening some groups, as LaTrenda was discussing just a minute ago, pulling some superintendents together to lead some work around restart planning. And again, that's going to be a daunting task as we move forward, because we're talking about not just changing schedules, but changing the way we operate and communicate and function. What are our daily routines? And some major changes will be coming to some of those practices. And so I think we're just trying to gather as much input as we can and be very measured in how we go about that, so that we're being mindful that we're trying to capture everyone's voice.
I think that the uniform answer from everyone on this panel that I hope everyone's listening to is listening, right? Again, I mentioned this earlier. It's sort of sad that it's not in our nature sometimes to go immediately to that. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves, but it's so critical that we spend the time to bring the people who actually have the problems. I think a lot of times a bunch of people who don't have a particular problem will sit in a room with their hearts in absolutely the right place and say, look, there's a population that has this issue and I want to help, I want to solve, but they never ask the population that has the issue. And sometimes the problem is a lot more nuanced or different than what that group of people think. So that, bringing people together, asking those questions is really critical. So when we find the needs, we start the initiative. I don't know about all of you, but I imagine that these initiatives that you're starting were not, many of them were not in the roadmap 3 months ago or 4 months ago. These are new initiatives designed to meet these specific needs. So I have a question that I'm going to ask a question that Eric Meyer posted, and he asked it specifically to Alyssa, so I'm going to ask her first, but I think it spreads beyond just this initiative in Cleveland. So Eric's asking Alyssa, this is a new novel program that you weren't expecting. So who is actually doing this work? Who's supporting this pilot work? Who's matching students? Who's reaching out to students? Who's doing this when we didn't plan to do it?
Right. And so that's where the beauty of the ecosystem structure kind of just sort of fell into place. It all was very organic. The marketing director for Goodyear Tire and Rubber saw it on my LinkedIn profile, and it's an Akron-based company, and volunteered if he could play a role. in this, then 4 other marketing professionals, heard about it just honestly through LinkedIn and through, email blasts from NeoSTEM, and they volunteered. So they are working with the businesses and the students, and they helped with the matchup in the very beginning. And then we had some local coding clubs in Cleveland, Indeed We Code and She Can Code It, who volunteered to help us with the application process and to make sure that the things were properly vetted, and that the questions were phrased in the right way, that we wouldn't be excluding any students from this, which was super important for us, and that we were being very inclusive in how we asked the questions and so forth. And also the Community Development Corporation has been the primary interface for the businesses. So it was all just kind of grassroots, organic, having the ecosystem structure in place, made it very easy to do an initiative like this. So does that answer, Eric?
Yeah, I think it does. And so, Mary, what about in Cincinnati? Same question. These new initiatives, how are you staffing them? How are you finding the time to make them actually happen?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, you mentioned you probably aren't doing things that you had done before, and it's like, oh my goodness, no. What we were able to do was take the funds that we have and just check in with all of our funders and say, we are thinking a better use of these funds now is to do this. And every one of them has said, absolutely, we trust you. We know you're going to do the right thing. Go, please. That's one thing. We did a check with our funders. We really haven't raised any new money yet. We're talking about that, but really there's been no money. We have been really intentional about helping partners come together. We talked about, we have an ecosystem. There are many, many partners in the ecosystem, but many of them have not worked together before. So the why, we've always had a nice relationship. Inter-Alliance, always a nice relationship. We've helped them learn how to work together in different ways. And so I think it's really been a testimony to the ecosystem approach of having lots of people in your network that support the bigger work. And then because the need is so dramatic, everybody's been flexible on finding new ways to use what they have, people, talent, assets, online resources, everything, and find new ways to package them to get them where the need is.
So Mary, I know that with your initiatives, I know that you already were working towards a big family engagement project, and that really had to change.
Yes.
Kind of as part of this. What did that change, look like? How did you know it was time to make that pivot, and how have you reallocated to make that pivot happen?
You want me to just tell a story to make it real?
Sure.
Okay. In 2019, we created a deck of cards. I got them right here. They're online. We talked about them on an early webinar in April or something. These were created in 2019. There's 52 of them, one per, 13 per suit. Suits are science, technology, engineering, and math. A couple days into COVID, we realized that these were gold because they were designed for families to engage at home in simple STEM games with simple materials, low cost, commonly found in homes. We made a decision about 5 days in to publish these 2 a day on social, Facebook and Twitter. We've blown past the original deck a long time ago. We still publish 2 a day on Twitter. We've gone through the 52 cards. We're now on the extension pack. Along the way, a woman who's on this call, her name is Erin Milligan. I want to give her the shout out. She's from the Hamilton County Educational Service Center. She's lovely and wonderful. And she said, I think we could build STEM activity kits around these cards. And my team up here wants to, and we found some money and a couple donors. We're going to go. And they partnered with 2 districts that have low income rates and high, reduced free food rates. And they partnered with these districts to where families were coming to get food. They started giving out kits of materials and STEM cards. Another group heard about it. Another group heard about it. Another group heard about it. And now this is one of our main summer activities. So we are thrilled that our idea of like a simple activity set of activities created in 2019 will probably go to about 15 to 2,000 families this summer with materials through partners who haven't worked together before. So they're going to be handed out at Wise and libraries and recreation centers and human services agencies across town. So this is good because we think it serves families, but people like Aaron and the other K-12 educators, kind of back to Frank's point, they're telling us that what they expect in the fall is learning will be a combo of taking place in the building and taking place at home. So now people like Aaron and her friends, even at the state level, are talking about how might we equip teachers with these kits. How might we show the teachers how these things align to the standards that they're held accountable to teach? And how might we equip the teachers to send them home to families and reinforce the learning back and forth between the home environment and the school environment? It all started with 2 a day on social. From a
Mary, I know that
researcher-
this is a common thing every time you talk about those cards, but there are people asking in chat where they can find them and all of that stuff. So if you could enter that in the chat, so people have those links, I'd appreciate it.
I will.
Frank, kind of on this idea of finding new partners and addressing new problems, I know that you're working on a big initiative to connect the unconnected and to expand connectivity. Can you tell us a little bit about what the genesis of that was and what the models are there that people might be able to replicate in their own ecosystems? I think you're muted.
Yeah,
There
the connectivity issue is twofold. One is access to a device, and then the other one is actual internet access. And sometimes, as you know, the Wi-Fi hub isn't going to cut it because there's no cell signal anywhere nearby. So we are in North Carolina, there are a couple of organizations that are really promoting and advocating to clear out some of these dead spots, especially in the rural communities of North Carolina. So there's a group out of NC State called the Institute for Emerging Issues, and they've been doing a series of awareness events around the state for a couple of years now, and they tie it all back to funding from the USDA grants to address connectivity issues. In North Carolina, we're also fortunate to have some strong professional organizations, which I had mentioned earlier, and some nonprofits that are huge champions for social needs. And so in addition to promoting awareness, there are research groups who are publishing work and sharing those with key stakeholders, legislators, community, local county commissioners, school boards, and sharing that information in a way that is found some momentum, especially here in the COVID crisis. And the momentum being that it's not just students who are working at home now, K-12 students who need access, it's their parents who are now teleworking. It's the business owners who are relying on their workforce to continue to be productive. And if those families don't have access in their homes, nobody's getting anything done. And so now it's a pooling of different groups coming together to push the need for this. It's a utility. It's something that is needed. It's no longer a luxury to have wireless access in your home. And so there's a lot of momentum around that. And a few weeks ago, some of our legislation that has just been approved speaks specifically to addressing these areas of need in our state that no longer have or have never had connectivity. So there are some partners out there. It's not just the superintendents and the principals and the teachers anymore rattling the sabers and saying we've got to have connectivity, but we're getting a groundswell of support from other parties who are well prepared and resourced to support this work.
I love that idea. I mean, it's so critical. And I think that sometimes we don't think about the fact that a lot of the time when there's somebody on the other ideological side of us, wherever we lie, that there is an answer that gets to the same end effect. There's a cause, there's a need that they have that gets to that same end effect. A little bit, frankly, on that line, LaTrenda, I'd like to ask you this because you get all the hard questions. So right now we're in this time where I think that people are finding volunteers and partners easier than normal right now. There's this just kind of feeling across the country, across the world, that we people want to give back. They want to donate their time. So that's happening right now. When this all dies down in 6 months or a year, how do we maintain those partnerships, those relationships, once there's not that, the pandemic that's causing it, but we've found these great partnerships? How is Pittsburgh, frankly, so good at keeping its partners engaged long-term, year after year after year? What should we all be thinking and doing?
Well, so a couple things. One, I think the trick that we always do with folks and that convinces them to stay connected to our work is, one, we have focused for a very long time on building our own community that we use to share our good news with, right? And so because that community we've just created bigger and bigger circles of that community, and it has grown over the years, and we've been consistent about building that community. Now, when we have partners that do a thing with us, we instantly talk about it to that community. So that instantaneous turnkey talking about creates some accountability to continuing that relationship. So that to me, at least is our trick to continuing building on that. I also like to say, as it relates to, looking forward, looking at, the things that COVID has highlighted for us, and I imagine we're going to get into this, but at some point, I think, I'm hoping that us as ecosystems, continue to ask these systemic questions of like the why. So like, yes, we're talking now. Yes, we're getting you what you need, but why didn't kids have access before this? Why didn't you prioritize this as the superintendent of your district? Why? And I know that's a big thing for us right now in Pittsburgh, because we have a ton of districts that are like, of course, we have high resource districts and low resource districts, but we do have a district that sits in the middle of Pittsburgh that is a $650 million district with only 23,000 students. And they didn't start remote learning until 2 months after everyone really started remote learning. And so this is a district that has resources. This is a district that has leaders that come from the communities that our kids come from. What is the role of ecosystems when there is a leadership vacuum? Is like one of my big questions. And so yes, we can continue to work, and yes, we can continue to get our kids what they need, but we're going to talk about this blunder. And we need to figure out at some point, we got to address this, because like as ecosystems, as leaders, I cannot in good faith continue on whatever partnerships if you don't prioritize this as a need. So.
Yeah, the making sure that everybody understands the priorities and how we all fit together. That goes back to that ecosystem saying of oh my gosh, totally just drew a blank on the saying. But the mutually beneficial component of this work, that if we don't find what those volunteers need long term, then they're going to come for a little while out of the goodness of their heart, and then they're going to disappear because it's human nature and things come up. We've got to always be finding, how is this helping them in order to keep them long term. So we are almost out of time, and I've got this really interesting question here. I've got a few questions that we're unfortunately not going to get to right now, but as I mentioned before, we'll get to those in other fashions, I promise. But Fran Agnon has, I think, a really good question for us to use as our final goodbye. So I'm going to ask all of you to answer this one. Fran, are you there with us?
I am. Hello.
Hi.
You hear me?
Fran. Yeah, I do. I love your question. Could you ask it to the panel?
Sure. My question is, where do you all feel that STEM learning falls right now as a need for our educators and students when life has changed so much? And so the real question is, how do you think it fits into supporting social emotional health and wellness? Where do our roles fall, and how do we kind of balance that need for STEM learning with social emotional health?
Our families have all sorts of things on them right now, things that they've never dealt with before. We still think that STEM is important, but in that big list of things, where does it fall? What's our role? Where does it all fit? Mary, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll go. When we're talking with the kids, lots of times when they're together for some program, we talk in terms of STEM are the problem-solving solutions, problem-solving disciplines. STEM people solve problems, and when we're talking to kids, we talk about how many problems there are in the world. They see a lot of them. They're seeing a lot of them right now. We need them to grow up to be tomorrow's problem solvers. They are our future. I think that still holds. I was talking this morning with the College of Business at our home organization, University of Cincinnati, our fiscal agent. And they had done some work to show how their programs relate to STEM, because typically you don't think of a business school as STEM, it is STEM. And they said the same thing, we're teaching kids how to be students, how to be problem solvers. And what we do in our programs, we measure impact, like did they build new skills? Are they more interested in STEM? But this important question we ask is, Fran, do you feel like you're more capable to solve problems? It's a social emotional competence question. When we know when children have positive experience creating and solving problems, they build confidence, they feel better about themselves, they feel more empowered to take on another thing. And I don't want to diminish food and shelter and families with jobs, but I think there are these gifts that STEM can give children that build their confidence and build their skills that prepare them for futures. And I hope a lot of these really poor kids grow up to be our problem solvers, because they will have the understanding of the need in a way that the privileged will never have.
Absolutely. Frank?
I think a lot of it is how you approach STEM, and hopefully STEM is something that it's at the root. It's a core part of teaching and learning every day, so it is integrated across all contents, all grade levels, all disciplines, and so you're focusing on those skills, but you're also learning, how to be self-regulated, how to communicate, self-awareness. Those sorts of critical social emotional competencies are a natural part of STEM. And as we develop deeper understanding of STEM, we know that it's about inquiry. It's about how we learn, our natural curiosity. And I was looking at some of the questions that were popping up, how do we make remote learning more hands-on? And there was a comment about, you break it down into smaller tasks. You ask, you use everyday materials to make sure that any student has access to this. So what I think is really important is that we know that our teachers know how to facilitate that sort of learning for students. So when they are engaged in remote learning, it is meaningful, it is problem solving, it's relevant, and it's something that students can connect back to. So whether they're helping their schools design a restart or a reentry plan, it's something real that they're dealing with right now, and they have skills that they've picked up in school and honed at home as well as outside in their community that they're able to apply to these. So STEM needs to be the way that we are approaching education moving forward. It's a transformational power.
It's a way of thinking. Alyssa?
Yes.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jeremy. For me, it is, absolutely a way of thinking. It's a way of solving problems. It's a way of trying and failing. And so therefore, it's never been more relevant for me, than right now. Certainly meet, health and safety needs and food and all of that. But I would put this right immediately behind that. As a way of teaching creative thinking and problem solving and so forth.
I'm guessing you said my name.
I did.
Well, so I think that this time more than ever has highlighted the need for educators to have relationships with kids. And so I think when it comes to social and emotional, if you have a relationship with a child, regardless of the content, like the kid is going to get it, the kid is going to receive it, even though they're going through all of their things now. And I think that's another thing we have to continuously think about. Like we have to raise the bar for kids, right? They want some continuity right now. They may not be going to class, they may not be showing up in front of a computer, but they want that person who had a relationship with them before COVID to still have that relationship with them now. So that's what I would say to folks. If you didn't have a relationship with kids before COVID and you're trying to teach them STEM, they're not trying to hear you. So they're not trying to hear any of the STEM. But if you had a relationship with them and you want to switch it to like be that STEM content, that STEM, input and offering, that's awesome. But like, if you had no relationship with kids and families, they're not going to receive it. And so I put that out there to this community because we just need to think about that and center that and then get to the STEM.
It's a dual component, right? We all in this group know about, obviously the jobs line, which is not my favorite line. I like the transferable skills line that Mary and Frank and Alyssa were talking, but those of us who worked in schools prior know without relationships, none of this happens. And I think that's really the message of this entire hour is that this is all about relationships. It's about relationships with our students. It's about relationships with our communities. It's about finding the needs that they have and addressing those needs, which is really the power of the ecosystem initiative. This has been STEM Community Conversations from STEM at Home, brought to you by the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice. Thank you for joining us today as we discussed how ecosystems have been working to meet the needs of the communities they serve in these trying times. Thank you, LaTrenda, Mary, Frank, Alyssa. These community conversations will revolve around successful models and new ideas to support STEM learning experiences during and beyond this time of social distancing. Stay tuned to stemecosystems.org for upcoming shows, and please continue to participate. I'm Jeremy Shore, and we will see you next time.